Hello, good evening. Sorry, good afternoon. How are you? I know that some people are asking me about getting in, about the password. I think now I see people getting in, so I think it's fine. I'll wait just for a few more seconds. I hope you're having a nice afternoon. In Miami, I have people joining in from Argentina, from Colombia, from Mexico, from Texas, from California. So I'm truly honored to have everyone on board here today. And I'm going to just give 30 more seconds. It's been really nice to see everyone joining in. I see parents and people who I work with that have been working for a long time. I also see some new parents. Welcome aboard. And I also see some parents who have been working for some time. So definitely it's an honor to have you all. Before getting started, I want to share my screen. All right. So today, let me tell you first about what my passion is at work. At My Optimal Child, I'm passionate about help children become better version of themselves. That is not necessarily to be the best in the classroom, not necessarily to be the best in everything, but how they can become a better version of themselves. How can be the person that they want to be, especially in learning. So I want to share with you today as parents what we can do when we are actually spending some time, when we find the time actually to spend the time with your child and how we can make the most of that precious learning moment. How we can make the most of letting your child learn and optimize that learning at that particular moment. It could be schoolwork, it could be studying for a test, it could even be through the Zooms that we have so far, and they are challenging enough. I think that actually now having our children next to us and being able to observe how they interact in the classroom is giving us a lot of information about how our children are learning. We have the chance to compare our children to other children who are interacting in the classroom, and that gives us kind of a perspective of how they're doing compared to being in school and just listening to the teacher's perspective. I think now with the pandemic, if there's something good about the situation, is that as parents, we are the responsibles to make the most efficient way to help our children learn. And that hasn't been in the past. So that's the moment, even though I know that it's just 3 weeks till school ends, but we're going to have a long summer, and eventually we're going to see how the future holds in the upcoming academic year. But definitely I believe that we as parents now are, with the roles that we have so far, somehow we are more responsible about how we can help our children learn and make the most of it. So the first thing that I want to acknowledge is that it's not just the child. It's not just about blaming our children about what they should do or about what they shouldn't do during the precious moment of learning. There are many things that affect learning. At least I want to acknowledge 3 facts today. The child's learning needs, we're going to go through that. How is a child-parent relationship through that specific moment of learning, and what is the home setup, what is the home environment which allows or doesn't allow the child to be able to succeed in that precious moment of learning. So before I get started, I would like to open up a poll and ask you the following. Can you see the poll? Okay. does your child, when you observe your child in the Zoom meetings or when you're working with him or her, do you see your child that typically he or she will rush through things, like they will try to do it too quickly and keeping tasks or leaving tasks incompleted? Or maybe you see that your child takes longer than most kids through the Zoom meetings, and when your child is actually like finishing up copying or doing a math problems, the teacher or even like the other kids are already finished and they're going through another task. What do you see your child here? Let's see, I'm gonna give a few more seconds to see what the replies are, and we're gonna talk about that. Okay, so I'm gonna have to just close this poll. Not everyone voted, but I just wanted, just for the sake of keeping up this session, I'm gonna end it, and I wanna share with you that it's been like most of your kids, it seems that the learning style that they have, what I call, it's like the cheetah style. And some other kids, some other of your kids are more kind of, they go slower. Either way, if your child tends to be a cheetah and he or she rushes through things, that is going to have an impact on learning. Why? Because it's most likely that he's going to skip some things. He might commit some mistakes, inattentive mistakes. If he's doing a math problem, maybe he would add instead of subtract because he didn't pay attention to the plus or minus. Or through a test, maybe he will say, oh, I finished. Here it is, Mom. I finished it up. And then he will review, and maybe he skipped one or two questions. And that doesn't help, right, in learning. On the other side, on the other extreme, you have kids who take longer. Maybe they don't rush through. Maybe they complete everything, but for them, in order to complete everything, they need more time. So maybe that also affects, because if the teacher is kind of going through as like an average pace, he won't be able, or she won't be able to keep up to what's going on. The cheetahs typically, they fidget. They are kind of hyper. They cannot wait for other people's turn when they are listening to other peers. They just want to jump and do it. On the other side, the slower learners, they tend to ask more questions. If you ask him something, you would have to kind of ask him a few times in order for that kind of to process that information in order to give an answer. So either way, and sometimes even as a kid, that won't be able, won't go through the cheetah all the time. And he tries to kind of go through things pretty quickly in reading, and maybe he's lower when it comes to math. But what I truly believe it's important for us is, number one, when we try to optimize that precious moment of learning with your child, is to take into account what are your child's learning needs. Throughout this workshop, the webinar, I would invite you to kind of start writing down some comments in terms of how do you see your child, what are the specific needs of your child, and how many eventually we're going to tackle how to help him according to those kind of profiles. So again, try to remember as your child tries to rush it through, or it takes more time, because either way, it's going to have an impact when he or she is actually learning. I want to share with you, if you had to choose one concept from all these years of professional experience in learning that I valued most, and it is not, it was developed led by Gotsky in the 80s, but still is so important. It's the concept, what is called the zone of proximal development. Actually, I believe that the zone of proximal development, it's what the learning process is. Let me give an example, and we will go through then the concept. In order for us to be in learning mode, it's not if we are asking things to do on your own. You know, if we can do things all our without assistance, that's not a learning moment. We're in this side. If you're being asked, if you're asking your child to do something that yet, no matter how much support he or she cannot do it, that's not a learning process. The learning process actually happens in the middle, happens here. So for example, a 3-year-old, within the average range, he will start walking, right, about a year or 18 months. If you ask a child to learn how to walk at 3 years old, and that's your goal, it's most likely, it's not a challenge, right? He's walking and he doesn't need any support. He's beyond like this learning process. But if you're asking a 6-month baby to walk, even though you're gonna be holding his hand, you're gonna be trying to kind of help him walk, he's not gonna be able to do it, right? He's gonna be on this end. Someone who will be able to learn how to walk, how to be like in that learning moment, is someone who, let's say about 9 months to 18 months, he or she will be able, to walk with your support, like hold hands. That is the support of a person, you know, so things you can do with a bit of help, and that help can be from you. Help can also be from the furniture, like, you know, holding to the furniture and walking through the furniture. So the help here doesn't have to be necessarily from a person at the time. So think about your child. Think about what you're asking your child to do. Is it too easy? It's not challenging enough? And that's not a learning process. Are you asking your child to do something so difficult that even with all the support, he cannot do it? Way out of his range, and he's not going to be motivated to do so. And again, learning happens when you are motivated to do it. You need to be engaged in doing it. You need to be in this zone of optimal development. You need to be learning something that it's not as easy, but not as hard, and you need that support. That support, it can be in that specific moment that you're teaching your child or you're doing schoolwork with your child. That can be you, but that can also be a friend. That can also be, of course, a teacher, and that can also be technology. Nowadays, there are so many apps that kind of provide us that help. So take into account throughout these 20 minutes, 25 minutes that we have left, when you are actually working with your child, how are you preparing that zone of proximal development? What is the support that, according to your child's learning needs, are that you're gonna create support that learning moment? I'll give you just a few examples right now. So the first thing, in order to create that learning moment, is to, of course, to be able to take into account our child's learning needs. The other aspect is to take into account how is our child and parent relationship in that moment. Do you see yourself here? I do. I do a lot of the times. If you are not having a balanced relationship with your child in that moment, that zone of development will happen, right? I would like to go through a new poll now, and ask you following. When you do schoolwork with your child, do you feel like you're putting more energy and effort to do the work that your child? Do you feel like when you're sitting down doing homework, or when you're in the Zoom, you are kind of doing too much? You're, you know, spending a lot of effort, and you are trying to tell him or her lots of things and try to do things for her or him in order to actually do the job? let's do this. So what I figured out here, share some results. Sorry, I'm not giving you a lot of time, so it's just a few who will be able to complete the poll. Most of us answered yes, right? Typically, as parents, when we see that our child is rushing through the cheetah or being too slow, the snail, what we try to do, we try to fill the gap. If you see that the balance here of efforts, that you are up here and your child is down there, something is off. Typically, when we see that, we, as I said before, we try to fill the gap of what your child is not able to do. And by doing so, we're not actually letting your child learn through that process. We are just doing things for them. If you see yourself in that balance and you're doing, again, more, you're putting more effort at them, that it's not gonna work, minimize your child's learning. You need to back off and you need to provide and empower back your child before doing anything else. That is, you need to give responsibility to your child that it's his work or her work, that you're gonna be supporting, but you're not gonna be doing the job. Nothing is gonna happen in terms of course, things are get done. Homework is gonna be completed, these are gonna get done, but he or she's not gonna take anything out of that learning process. Now, maybe you can ask me how I can give that power back to my child. And I'm gonna share just a few tips with you right now. So either way, either learning style, either learning preference, you need to set up a plan with your child, not for your child, right? The first thing that we need to do, again, is work with our children, like together, and set up a plan. How do we do that? Definitely acknowledge the fact, it doesn't matter if your child is 5 years old or 18, talk to your child and ask questions about how he is feeling about doing schoolwork. So you can, if he's the type, you can ask your child, do you think that sometimes you rushes through, you try to do things too quickly? Or like ask questions about, for them to acknowledge and become a little bit more aware of how they're doing. If they find it too difficult to identify those learning characteristics, just provide some options for them to choose. But eventually, let them become more aware of how they're learning, and then offer them some options and tell them, let's make a plan together. Because definitely you can also ask, your child, are you happy when I'm kind of yelling at you and telling you so many things about this? Most kids will say no. So you can set up a plan with your child together and ask your child, okay, what do you need from me? Do you need me to tell things like 3 times? Do you need me? Sometimes some kids would say, instead of yelling me from the other room, please finish your homework, I need you to tap my shoulder and remind me what I have to do. So ask your child what they think they need in order, to help them out learn better, and set up a plan, a specific plan with them. So here's an example. For someone, for example, this is an example for my daughter, right? She's in pre-K4, they're doing the Zoom every day, and they are writing every day, the day of the week, the date, the month, the year, and how many boys, how many girls. I can compare myself and I can compare my daughter that some kids, her age will write down everything on a whiteboard without any assistance, and they can do it on their own. But I found out that if I provide some support to my child, again, that's the zone of proximal development, what type of support I'm providing for her to become an independent learner. If I provide some, shapes for her to fill in and some guidance for her to know what to put and where to put, then she was able to do it on her own, and she didn't, she didn't need me like all the time pointing out what she had to do. So that's for a little girl. But if you think about a middle schooler, typically in a Zoom meeting that maybe they have to do so many things at the same time, I would suggest to plan out the session or the Zoom meetings with the teachers. So write down with him everything that he's supposed to do during that meeting. And then he can check off everything that he's been doing. That's one idea, to set up the plan and to have some visual aids to go through the session or the day or that learning specific moment. Some other smart interventions that I would recommend you to do, and those are the things that typically we do with the educational therapies that I have in my team, is to help out kids through visual aids, through color coding. Color coding works amazing for most of the skills. For example, this is for a reading comprehension. This is for a 6th grader, but you can do the same for a 1st grader. Color coding means, for example, here, that she would have to highlight in blue the main ideas, and then highlight in yellow the details, and then highlight in red the location. So definitely, or like the date. So what we can do, we can support your child, not necessarily just giving her like the full text on her own and just answering the questions, but going through those specific questions that they are being asked, and provide one specific color for each of those questions, and have her highlight those questions in the text before heading into answering the questions. That is something that you can go and you can guide your child to do it, and eventually if they do it in a consistent basis, then she will be able, or he will be able, to go through the text much easier and comprehend the text much easier than if she just has to find information on her own. Another example could be for math. For math, most kids who rush through things, or even need like work slower, they would need step-by-step instructions. So here you have, for example, the problem that is for like a 7th grader. So you have the problem, and then you kind of guide your child through step 1. You have to divide both sides by 14. Step 2, like minus divided by 14, and then the equation. So you go and you follow through each of those steps, and you write them down with them, and then you ask your child to do it independently, following those steps. So again, we are in the zone of proximal development. If we pretend our children to go from not being able to do it even without help, to do it on their own, just magically, and jumping through that zone of proximal development, it's not going to be possible. We need to help our children go through that learning process using some support. So at the beginning, you're going to be providing maximum support, and that is, for example, here, modeling how to do those problems and how to go step by step. And then the idea is to take off some of those little steps. So then first you model it and you go through that. Then you have those steps, and then you give your child the possibility to solve another math problem just looking at those steps. Not with you helping out next to you, but just through those steps. And eventually then the goal is to do it without the assistance of the help, but at least he's still, he's slowly by slowing doing it independently. Another thing that it's so important to take into account when we're working with our children doing schoolwork is to identify the child's saturation point. And that is, some children, and most children, can really sit through for so long. But try to identify what's the specific moment, how many minutes can your child stand doing schoolwork? And split up that work. We're going to go through that in the checklist. But here are some examples that you can ask your child to do in order to just have like some brain breaks. Brain breaks are very efficient because there's a lot of research that would say that movement allows us, like human beings, to be able to focus and to pay more attention. So for example, if someone is doing some math calculations and then you find that he's struggling, just ask her to do some push-ups. For some kids who are kind of hyper and they move a lot, doing push-ups, doing jumping jacks, that allows them for a minute and then go back to what they were doing. That helps them a lot to refocus and to be able to do the work again. For some others that may prefer some more gentle movements, yoga exercises such as like different like animals or breathing techniques can also help. Then go back and refocus. Again, don't expect your child to be working for so long. It's better to just work in small chunks, do some brain breaks, and then go back to what he or she needs to do. So we talked about some of the learning, needs. We talked about our relationship and how much we put together in that specific moment of the learning process will have an impact on the learning process. If we give too much, if we put too much energy, we're kind of allowing our child to put less energy. So it's a balance. We need our children to be responsible and to empower them to be able to work and do the work better and learn better, right? But now we will try the third key point. Today, I want to discuss with you how the home environment provides the key to be able to work efficiently when we're actually working with the child. So it's not just about deciding, okay, now I have the time, I have 20 minutes in my agenda, let's do the work, come on, kiddo, let's sit down and let's do the homework or let's study together. That's probably not gonna work. We need to set up the day and the flow of the day, so when we arrive to that precious moment of learning, we can make the most of it. For the little ones, I suggest setting up, like, again, a routine with your child, with everyone, with your child, not for your child. How is the day going to look like? With the little ones, you can use a lot of visual aids. That's kind of an example that typically what we do, we add the picture of the child here. And then without like that train, we kind of go through each of those moments of the day and we anticipate what it's going to happen. So I'm sure you remember when your kids were babies, how much our pediatricians, or even if you read books about parenting for babies, how much everyone would talk about routines, right? How important routines were or are actually for babies. Truth is, for children and even adults, having routines also work perfectly well, and they're really important. Why? Because when we have and we know a routine, our brain basically kind of uses our stress and our anxiety of what's going to happen. We know what's going to happen, and that allows us to be more prepared to what's going to happen. So if you know that your child is going to be working, let's say that you decide with your child to be doing homework before shower, right? And your child knows the whole day, eventually, and you keep reminding, and your child goes through the day and goes through, okay, we've seen this, we've done that, okay, in 5 minutes, like in 30 minutes, homework is happening. When it's actually the time for homework, your child is going to be mentally more prepared than if you jump into doing it right away. So please take that into account, and setting up, as for now, a structure, I believe that it's even like more important than before in our regular lives. So these are examples of how you can set up the routine for the little ones. This is an example that we created with one particular child that we're working with. And again, visual aids and the times and the flow of the day works really well. Now, when you're actually, so you set up the schedule of the day, you're actually working with your child. As we discussed before, breaking down the work in smaller chunks, it's going to be much more efficient than just trying to go through the full half an hour or 2 hour of studying. I would encourage you to create kind of a homework or a study tracker in which, again, as you see here, you have the date and you create that with your child. You write down everything that you're supposed to do during that learning process. And then every time she completed something, she kind of checks it out. And I would suggest that in between like tasks, I don't know, completing math work and finishing an essay, you do some brain break. And then you go back. You can even discuss about what reward it's going to have if she's able to complete everything without, again, you having to spend more energy on, on the comparing with her. I've been rushing through a lot of things. This is kind of a webinar for 30 minutes, and there's so many things that we can talk about. But I want to remind you, again, when you are spending time with your child doing schoolwork, that in order for your child to learn and make the most of that learning, he or she needs to have positive learning experiences. If you find your child that is not motivated to do the work, it's most likely that he or she is not in that zone of proximal development. She's either not challenged enough to do those things, or maybe they are beyond, what they can do even with help, or you are doing too much, so your child is unmotivated because he doesn't have the power to do the things on his own. He needs to be his own learning. He needs to be the one who puts effort and energy in that learning process. So definitely try to think about how you can make the most of that positive learning experience, taking into account your child's learning needs. And again, even if you like it or not, identify what are his needs. Maybe you have certain expectations of a child. Most parents, we have different type of expectation of our children, but then the reality is another one. Acknowledge that, acknowledge your expectations with the reality of how your child is doing. That's the first thing that we as parents should do. And then try to help your child according to that particular needs. Also check how is your child-parent relationship through that moment, and what are the things that you need to change as a parent in order to support best your child. And also take into account how is the home environment to let your child optimize and that learning process and how to make the most of that specific moment of learning. Creating routines is very effective, anticipating what is coming in the day, and even anticipating and organizing all the materials that he or she is going to need when you start schoolwork. If you see this picture, I chose this picture to share, and to promote the webinar. It's because when I see this picture, what I see is a child who is actually being able to do the work independently, right? But if you see his face, he seems to be challenged enough. He's touching his lips, so it's like he's making some effort to complete his schoolwork. It seems that he's pretty organized because he has the computer, he has his paper, and he's very focused on working through that. In order for your child to kind of have, some of those precious moments of what his child particularly is doing, definitely, I believe we have to, again, take into account the 3 key points. What your child needs best for learning, how is the relationship in that particular moment with your child, and how are you structuring the home in order to become available and feasible in that moment. Thank you so much for being here today. I would remind that we have a Facebook page and we have an Instagram page that you can follow us. And typically we provide a lot of tips and recommendations. And next Tuesday, same time, I will be providing a webinar about the summer. And that is, I'm going to be providing some tips and information about how we can make the most of the summer for our children, how we can engage our children through fun activities, but at the same time, how we can help them on learning So thank you for today for spending time with me, and let me know if you need any help and reach out to me, and I would love to help you and your child. Bye-bye.